Voices of inspiration elevate the state. Wave of change ripples, never too late. Leaders who inspire, candles in the dark, casting light and hope, igniting each spark. Breaking chains, rearranging every arc. TammyRenee's voice, echoes leave a mark.
Come on into the wave of change, where I am interviewing leaders who inspire action, sharing stories, giving tips, and dropping those gems. Come make some waves with us. Share, like, comment, and ask a question if you dare. If you are catching this replay, you know what to do. Hit hashtag replay so that I know you've been here to join us. My name is TammyRenee, and I am here to help you make change and take action in your life. And today we are talking about health and hormones for women. We're getting into the health and hormones. Know what your body wants. Let's drop some waves in the comments and welcome Abby Vallejo, a holistic licensed healthcare practitioner and a personal trainer. Drop some waves. Hey,
Hi.
how are you today?
I'm good. How are you?
Oh, I am doing so good. I am so glad to have you here talking about our hormones and our health and what we putting in our body and what we should take out. But before we get started on that, why don't you go ahead and properly introduce yourself and tell us just a little bit about your business?
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Abby. I'm a licensed healthcare practitioner and personal trainer and health coach. And my area of passion and expertise is women's health and hormones. So I take a very female-focused approach in nutrition and diet and lifestyle and in my personal training, even in how I run my business. And women mostly come to me because they want to lose body fat while balancing their hormones, getting their energy up, getting their libido back. I work with a lot of women in perimenopause and menopause because this is a time that women just don't really get support during that age. You know, we're going through these hormonal transitions and fluctuations. It's still not something that is necessarily talked about. Better now these days, but you know, in the past, it was hardly even talked about. It was like a hush hush thing. Women were kind of like suffering in silence. Yeah, I know. And then our medical system is basically, you know, kind of built for men and men's health, right? All our clinical studies are done on men pretty much, you know, because women's hormones are a confounding factor. So it's easier to study men. It's easier to study even male animals versus female, right? Because the hormone. Yeah. Did you know that? That's an interesting.
No.
So basically, we have this whole healthcare system that's set up for men to thrive. And, you know, I mean, that's great for men, but what about us? We're not just small men. You know, as women, we have unique needs. So that is my area of passion and focus, is educating and helping women understand what are some targeted approaches that we can take to optimize our hormones and our health as women.
Oh my God. Oh my God. You touched my heart with all of that. I mean, because I am an older woman. I do, you know, when you talk about the libido part and stuff, it's so interesting because when I was younger, I had a high libido, you know. As I've gotten older, I kind of confuse myself. And sometimes I even get mad at myself because where did it go?
Yeah.
You know,
And
where did it? I don't understand. Like
a lot of women, that's what I hear from so many women. I have experienced that myself. And I think we as women tend to feel guilty too, because a lot of times we're like, oh no, my partner is going to think something is wrong and it's my fault. And, you know, we tend to think we're crazy or something's wrong with us. And it's really not. There's just certain things that have kind of dialed it down, and we can absolutely remove those blocks and get it back.
Yes. Oh my God. I'm so glad you're here to help me.
Yes, it's like getting your spark back, right? And like I said, I've been through this process. I've been in the process where I had hormonal imbalances, health issues, no libido, no energy, no stamina left. And you just kind of feel like a robot, right? Like you're just kind of pushing through life, but that spark is not there. And then there's steps we can take to rebalance those hormones. And as we do, it's like that spark comes back, and all of a sudden you're like, oh my gosh, I remember what it feels like to be a woman. I'm not just a robot. Like, here
Wow.
I am.
And do you think sometimes, let me ask you this, do you think sometimes that when you get into that energy, when your libido or, your energy has just dropped, that you tend to kind of do other things to avoid facing the situation? You keep yourself
Yeah.
busy doing other things.
I think that's a normal human tendency, right? And I think busyness is often a distraction that we use against us reaching our real goals or desires, what
Mm.
they may, even improving health, improving libido, building a business, whatever that is. I think a lot of times we get bogged down in the busyness and the maybe less important details rather than focusing on maybe the scary thing or the thing that intimidates us that we actually need to face head on if we want to get through it.
Yes, I love that. So when it comes to balancing your hormones and bringing in different things to help balance your hormones, what are some of the things you tell people to look for to know when your hormones are unbalanced?
Yeah, that's a good question. I definitely want to talk about that. Do you think that we could also mention? I actually often start by teaching what are the different hormonal phases that we as women go through every month, so we
Mm.
kind of have a solid foundation to build off of. And then we'll absolutely get into like, possible hormonal imbalances, signs and symptoms. But are you good with me starting with that?
Yeah, I didn't even know there were different
Okay.
levels. So
Yeah,
you
and
just
most women don't. So
surprised.
I feel like this is a really good place to start because we're not really educated on
Right.
what goes on in our bodies and our hormones, right? I mean, we basically, this is before I became a practitioner and specialized in this is basically what I knew. We get a period, maybe when we're 13 or 12 or however, old we are, we start getting a period. We get a period, we'll have a period for most of our lives, and then one day it's going to stop and we're going to go through menopause and we might have uncomfortable symptoms, and that's it, right? Like, that's kind of what we're taught as women. And if you have sex you can get pregnant, right? I mean,
Right.
like, there's just a few basic things that we're taught, but other than that, we don't really get more nuanced information about how our body actually works, right? So this is something I absolutely love teaching to women. And this applies to women of all ages, right? Whether you've gone through menopause or not, this is still something valuable for you to know because you still have the same hormones and you're still a cyclical being. So let me explain what I mean by that. So all women, as a rule, we go through 4 hormonal phases every month. Now, we know about the period, right? We know that we get a period every month, right? Unless, someone's irregular or on birth control or something that's suppressing it. But in general, we as women, we're supposed to get a period every month. Like, it's like the moon, right? We get a full moon every month. Women are like the moon. The moon go through phases. We go through phases too. So that's what I'm always saying. So we have 4 main phases. So I'm going to walk you through the 4 main phases and what they are. So phase 1, so let's start when a woman is still in her reproductive years because it's kind of easy to track with the period. So phase 1 would be the first phase when you get your period. Day 1, the first day that you bleed, that's the beginning of phase 1. Now I call that estrogen phase because that's when your estrogen is starting to rise. So if we were to look at a graph of what the hormones are doing throughout the month, they would be going up and down, like men, they have testosterone all month long, and it's just kind of this straight line of testosterone. They just have it. They get it every day, every 15 minutes, all month long. We as women, depending on where we're at, we're getting estrogen, we're getting testosterone, we're getting progesterone. It's going up and down. There's all these peaks and dips depending on where we're at. So this is kind of what we're talking about. So that day 1, we get our period, estrogen's coming in, and that is day 1 through 10 is you're an estrogen. So now the cycle is probably 5 to 7 days of that, depending on how long a woman bleeds. But she's in that estrogen phase for about 10 days, right? So the characteristic, and I always like to say hormones have a personality. I think this is really relatable, right? So like estrogen, testosterone, progesterone, they all have their own personality. And estrogen and progesterone, being our 2 main female sex hormones, they have very different personalities. So estrogen is like, she's outgoing. She can handle stress. She's vibrant, right? Estrogen's a lot like you, TammyRenee, like outgoing. I know you say introvert, but come on, outgoing, vibrant, energetic, resilient. That's estrogen, right? Versus progesterone, she's shy, she's introverted, she can't handle so much stress. She likes to stay home on the couch and like watch Netflix, right? So keep in mind the two very different personalities. And the reason why that's important is that in every phase that we go through, those 4 phases, we have different needs because the hormones that come out to play in each phase have their own personality and have their own needs, right? So estrogen's needs, she's resilient. So you can be active, you can work out. As long as you're feeling well with your cycle, this is a great time to be active, work out. But she doesn't like high blood sugar. So this is a really good time to keep carbs low. So for my ladies who are into like the lower carb, maybe keto or carnivore type diet, this is ideal for that phase, days 1 through 10. It's a great time. So don't eat too much sugar. Don't eat too many refined carbs. You want to keep that blood sugar nice and steady for estrogen. That helps estrogen thrive, right? So that's day 1 through 10. That's basically the period and a few days longer. After that, we move into ovulation, right? We ovulate typically about 2 weeks after the beginning of the period. So I give that a window anywhere between day 11 to 15 is where we're going to ovulate. Now, in ovulation, we have testosterone coming in, right? This is the only time of the month that we really get a bump in testosterone. What does that mean? Well, think about what testosterone is, right? That's like strength and stamina and libido and ability to build muscle, right? So during this time, we often have more energy. So it's a great time to go and lift weights because we have testosterone coming in. So if we want to build strength, work on building muscle, this is a perfect time. And we want to bring some carbs in to support testosterone and to support hormones. So I say that this is a really good time to eat kind of like a Mediterranean style diet. Keep your protein high, but bring in some healthy carbs, bring in some big green salads and things like that to support your hormones. Then after we go through ovulation, we move into a dip phase. So everything has kind of peaked at ovulation and then everything kind of dips for a few days. So from days 16 to 19, all of your hormones drop. And now this is something that if you've been tracking your cycle or kind of paying attention, for my ladies who are still in their reproductive years, you can often feel this because you'll feel great during ovulation. You'll feel strong, you'll feel sexy, you feel that libido that we're talking about, you'll have more strength, and then suddenly it all just drops off and you're like, where did it go? Like sometimes I'll be in the gym lifting weights and then a couple days later I'm like, oh, I have no energy to do that. What's wrong with me? And I've heard so many women say that. Nothing's wrong. It's just all your hormones dipped and you just naturally are feeling a dip in that energy. So that's about days 16 to 19 of the cycle, right? So during dip phase, this is very similar to your estrogen phase. So this is where you go back and you want to do a more of a low carb diet. If you're doing keto-ish or carnivore-ish, good time to just keep those carbs and those sugars low during that time. For my ladies who like intermittent fasting, it's a good time to cycle in longer fasts during this time. So that's the dip phase, right? And then finally, the fourth and final phase is progesterone. So our other main female sex hormone, progesterone, starts coming in this final phase. Now, progesterone has to come to a healthy peak before we can have a cycle, have our period that starts again, right? So the average woman's monthly cycle is about 28 days long, which is what we're going off of, right? So for progesterone to come in, we actually need to bring some carbs back in. So this is where I say that all the major diets and styles of eating out there have really kind of failed us as women because they haven't taken progesterone into account. So when we talk about things like keto diet or carnivore or intermittent fasting or low carb or any of those, like popular diets that are out there these days that tend to work very well for men, where men tend to lose weight, tend to get a lot of gains, right? They tend to do really well. Oftentimes women will get on them, maybe they'll get some initial results and then they'll plateau, or they'll get on them and then suddenly they're losing their hair and they're getting hormonal imbalances. And they're like, what went wrong? Well, what went wrong is those diets don't support progesterone. So remember when I said estrogen and progesterone have very different personalities? They support estrogen just fine. Estrogen can do just fine with keto or carnivore or low carb, right? For that phase that you're in estrogen. Progesterone does not like those. So if you are doing those diets as a woman, long term, you are damaging your progesterone levels over time. So it's not that we can't use those as tools, but we need to cycle them in and cycle them out, which is why I teach about the 4 phases, because your needs are a little different in each phase, right? So progesterone is a time where I tell ladies, if you're doing a low carb diet or you're dieting or you're being really strict with yourself, take a little break during that week, the week before your period, bring some healthy carbs back in. Doesn't need to be crazy, but eat some potatoes, have some root veggies, have some squash, have some root veggies, bring some healthy carbs back in to support your progesterone. Take it a little easy, because that's the week. Not only do we naturally crave carbs, we're a little more irritable. We have a little less energy, right? So this is more of an easy restorative week. And if you take good care of yourself that week, it's more likely you're going to have an easy period by the time your period comes around. And then we do the whole cycle again. So that's basically why I say women are like the moon, because just like the moon going through these phases, we're going through these 4 phases every month again and again.
Yeah, it sounds like we have a lot of diversity to us.
Well, we do. And that's why people say women are so complicated, because was that not a lot of information?
And with all that information, I found it I hope y'all wrote all that down, because that was, if you didn't, hit rewind.
I know. Well, I also
and
have
write
this
that
all
down.
written down. I have this all written down as a free resource. So if you're like, oh my gosh, she was talking about day what to what, like
Yes.
we can link my free resource and you can get it. I have it all written down for you. So
Okay. So there was a couple of things that kind of came up while you were talking about that I really want to know the answer to.
Yeah.
One is, so when you're having a cycle and you're having this craving, sugar craving, when does that normally happen? Does that normally happen during the first phase?
So we tend to think that it does, but it really is more common to happen during progesterone, which is that last phase before we get our period. So, I think the period gets a bad rap. Traditionally women have been like, oh, I'm on my period, I'm having cravings, I'm irritable. But if you really pay attention, it's actually that week before, the progesterone week, that we're more likely to experience cravings, that we're hungrier. I mean, we're literally growing part of an organ, right? The lining of our endometrium. We're going to be hungrier. We're going to need a little more calories. We're going to be craving carbs to support progesterone. And we might be a little more irritable and have cravings. So it's that week before the period. So that's why I say, if you take good care of yourself that week, over time, you're going to have easier periods.
I wish I would have known this.
That's why I want every woman to know. And I think it's valuable, even if you've gone through menopause, you still have.
That was my next question. How do you know from a person who's been through menopause, especially if it's a person who's been through menopause for years?
Yeah.
How do you know what your flow, your cycle is?
Yeah. So
4 phases.
You have more flexibility once you've gone through menopause. But what I tend to find with my clients is that I have them sync up with that same cycle. Now, they can either follow the phases of the moon, or they can just pick a calendar date and say, I'm going to pretend I'm getting my period on day 1 of the month, and I'm just going to follow the phases through, because you still have the same hormones, and the hormones still have the same personalities and cyclical needs. So you want to make sure you're still supporting all of them accordingly. And how many years of your life were you cycling, right? Like, we as women, our bodies are optimized with that cycle. So it's easy to just, for a postmenopausal woman, it's easy to just pretend that, just follow the calendar patterns and just act accordingly.
I like the idea you use the moon cycle, because I don't know, with me, something just doesn't click based on what you told me of just picking a day.
So, intuitively, I feel like it makes more sense to follow the moon, because if you think about it, before we had all this artificial light in modern society, we bled according to the phases of the moon, right? We would have a period. So mostly we would have a period during the new moon and ovulate during the full moon. That was a very normal cycle for all of human history. But now, with all the blue light and the artificial lighting, and, we're not outdoors as much, we're not as in tune with nature. Now we've kind of gotten off track, but I still feel like we have this intuitive, innate wisdom inside of us that wants to reconnect with that, especially as women, right? And so I think it's only natural for us to be curious and want to realign with our moon cycles and phases.
Right. And what was the other question I got? What kind of results have you seen? Because I know you said you focus on pre-med, whatever it is.
Perimenopausal.
Yes, that
Yeah.
word.
Yeah.
And all
Yeah.
of this is going to stay in the video. So y'all know I drop them raw.
That's okay. That's not a word that would necessarily be in your vocabulary. So there's perimenopause and then there's menopause. So
Right.
perimenopause, peri just means around. Peri is the years leading up to menopause. It usually starts around age 35, actually. And most women in the US go through menopause around the age 52. So those years from like 35 to 50-ish, we're starting to experiencing fluctuations in our hormones, right? We're not in full on menopause yet, but we might be like progesterone might be getting a little low. And here's where we can talk about some of the symptoms that we might start experiencing, right? So, after age 35,
before we go into the symptoms, I got one more question.
Oh yeah, of course.
What about if someone's had like a hysterectomy or anything like that? Does that affect your hormone imbalance, or do you still say this is still a good program to help you bring back those?
Oh yeah, I mean, a hysterectomy, of course, is going to affect your hormones. However, this is a good program for any woman.
Okay.
Because your hormones like to be in this cyclical pattern. So whether you're on birth control and you're not getting a cycle, whether you're irregular, whether you've had a hysterectomy, whether you've gone through menopause, you can still follow this cycle, whether you want to do it by the calendar or by the moon phases, and your body will still thrive. Your hormones will still thrive with this cycle.
Okay. Yeah. That was the last question I got for anybody who has like hysterectomies or anything, which I have.
Yeah.
And if this is something still feasible for them to help them get their health back on track.
Absolutely.
So back to those symptoms you were
let's talk about symptoms, because I feel like people always want to know about this, and there's quite a lot of them. So I do actually have a free hormone quiz. So if you're worried that you might have some symptoms, it's like I'll have checklist on there. So we can always share that as well. But let's go through some of the symptoms that I commonly see. So some of the first ones, so say like, when a woman gets in her late 30s, she might not know that she's experiencing hormonal issues, but some of the first ones are actually little things like she might start having trouble sleeping. She might notice that she's less resilient to stress. So suddenly like stress is getting to her. And I feel like it's usually a time when, the late 30s, early 40s is the time when the woman is like in boss babe mode. Like she's running the house, she's got her business, like she's doing this and that. She's going 100 miles an hour. And that's usually where these symptoms start to creep up, where she's like not keeping up with the stress as well. She's having trouble sleeping. Maybe her cycles are getting a little uncomfortable, right? So maybe she's getting headaches or migraines, especially if they're at certain times of the month. Those are very likely linked to low progesterone levels. And so all of those that I mentioned right now are linked to low progesterone. Progesterone is usually the one that we start to lose first. The levels start to get low first. She's the less resilient to stress, right? So with our stressful, fast-paced modern lifestyles, it's common to see younger women with lower levels of progesterone because she can't handle chronic stress. So then, maybe she's having heavier periods, she's more irritable, more stressed, she's having trouble sleeping. Suddenly she's like, why am I so irritable all the time? Or I feel like I've got PMS, or maybe my periods are kind of heavy and painful. That could be why.
Wow. That's a lot to take in.
Yeah.
That's a lot to take in. So you mentioned something about, I think I heard you mention something about the eating and the weight gain or weight loss or something. I thought heard you mention something about eating, what we're taking into our bodies.
Yeah, I mean, so in terms of like hormones being a barrier to weight loss, you mean?
Yeah, we were talking earlier. You were saying how eating less and working out is not your answer.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah, this does. Yeah. So I feel like the old kind of advice for weight loss, right, was just, well, like work out more and eat less, right? Like, oh, well, all you need to do is fix your diet. You just need to work out more. And sometimes, a lot of times, doctors will still say this, right? A woman will come in and she's exhausted and maybe she's having trouble with her hormones and she's not able to lose weight no matter what she does. And they'll just say, well, you just need to eat less and work out more. And it's like, So to any woman that's in that place, like my heart goes out to you, because first of all, it's not your fault and that is not the right answer.
Right.
Right. So I want to go back to the baseline of that our body's main priority always is safety and survival, right? So this is something I kind of always explain is that we have our goals, right? Like my goal might be I want to grow my hair, I want my skin to look good, I want my tummy to be flat, the goals like that. And then my body has its goals. And what is my body's goals that its number one priority all the time is going to be safety and survival. That's what it cares about, right? We are still primal beings. Like we have modern technology. Our bodies are not modern. We still have the same bodies that our ancestors had back in hunter-gatherer days, right? We still have these primal bodies. And these primal bodies care about safety and survival. So if we are doing something that our body deems as not safe, like not getting enough food, like kind of starving ourselves, not getting enough calories, overworking, overtraining. So not eating and overtraining, the body's going to think, oh no, like this is threatening my survival. And what is it going to do? It's going to start holding on to every little calorie. Because again, why? Think about our primal ancestors. If they were in survival mode, was it conducive to their survival to lose weight? No, it was conducive to store fat. They didn't have grocery stores and food everywhere that they could just go and buy or order. They had to go out and find it, right? So storing fat gave humans the ability to survive all these years before we had these modern conveniences. So if you put your body in a state of stress, it's going to go into survival mode and it's going to hold on to weight. And that's why eating too little and exercising too much, you're not going to lose the weight. It's like shooting yourself in the foot.
And I would like to say I am a witness to that eating, what we're talking about, the eating, because a few years ago, I kind of put me on this kind of, I'm not going to use the word diet, but I changed the way I eat. I was eating, and I was literally eating every 3 hours. When I say, and I was eating healthy things. But when I say, and I could have been watching the moon, doing it with the moon for all I know. But when I say I lost 80 pounds in 6 months.
Wow.
By eating more.
Yeah.
Than I did when I was over 250 pounds. So when I was over 250 pounds, people's like, oh, quit eating. You eat too much.
Just stop eating.
Right. But the problem is, it's not that, I wouldn't even say most people eat too much in that situation. Sometimes it's about what they eat. And sometimes it's about because they don't eat.
Right.
And that was where I was. And that's where I've kind of gotten again, because I'm always working. So I never eat. But I will say, when I went on that eating pattern that I was on, I literally ate every 3 hours.
Wow.
And the weight fell off with no exercise.
Yeah. And I think that really shocks women when I tell them, especially my women who are into working out. And, they're usually type A and they're pushing themselves in the gym and they're doing HIIT and they're running and they're, they kind of think the more they push themselves, the better it is. They are shocked when I say, you know what, you might actually need to eat more to lose weight, especially with all the activity that you're doing. And you might actually need to scale back on some of that activity, especially for my ladies who are perimenopause, menopause age. Like, now I'm not saying that we should never do cardio, but really, the closer we get to menopause, it is more conducive for us to work on building strength and muscle and do walking and maybe have like a cardio day, like 1 day a week where you do some HIIT, you do some cardio, but not overly punishing your body that puts you into that stress state where your body holds on to everything, right? So
I shouldn't be in the gym every 7 days a week doing what is it called? It wasn't gymnastics. What was it? They used to
like aerobics.
Yes, aerobics. That's so old, that name.
No. Yeah, no, I get what you're saying. So yeah, I mean, yes, we want to do aerobics. It's good for our heart, but I feel like a lot of times women will take that and, the typical narrative that we've heard is like, oh, I need to run for like a certain many miles every day, and if I'm not, I'm failing kind of thing.
Yes.
And that's what I'm just saying. You can really overdo it with that. So what we want to do is we want to focus on building strength, right? Because we need muscles. We need muscles to maintain our mobility, to stay strong. Muscles are important to regulate our blood sugar. So this is another side note. If you're trying to lose weight and you have high blood sugar, it's going to be really hard because that's a barrier to weight loss. High levels of insulin is a fat storage hormone. So if you have high insulin, if you have high blood sugar, it's going to be really hard to lose weight. So you need to fix that blood sugar first and foremost. But what helps with that? Muscles. Muscles are like a sink for your insulin and your blood sugar. They help regulate that. And they also burn more calories at rest. So what's like the single best thing that a woman can do for herself as she's aging? So working on building healthy muscles.
I love that you said that. And I say that because I know someone who's on the blood pressure medicine.
Mm-hmm.
So before they started taking the blood pressure medicine, they were overweight.
Mm-hmm.
But the blood pressure medicine has made them like lose all their weight.
Mm-hmm.
Not blood pressure, the sugar, the diabetic.
Oh yeah, like Wegovy or something like that. Yeah.
So it made them lose all the weight.
Mm-hmm.
But what we have noticed is there's no muscle tone.
They lose muscle too. And that's where I tell people, because when people ask me, what do you think about that? Side effects aside, which are individual to each person, I always say, we say lose weight, but what we really mean is fat. We want to lose fat. We're not trying to lose muscle or bone mass, right? You want to lose fat. And so when you take a drug like, those GLP-1, like Wegovy or things like that, they're going to cause you to lose muscle, and you can lose up to 1/3 of your muscle mass on those. So you might actually be almost worse off when you go off of them because you've lost a bunch of muscle. So now good luck keeping the weight off. Good luck controlling your blood sugar without the drug, right? So you have to be, when I have clients that come in that are on that and they're weaning off, I'm like, let's work on building muscle right now. You're going to need this muscle. So we get high levels of protein, a high protein diet, and we work on strength training.
Okay. Thank you for that advice, because I do know, I don't have any of those conditions, knock on wood, right? But I do know someone who is, and it's like all the muscle mass is gone, but they're skinny as can be.
Or not even to mention the face, right? You lose collagen, so the face gets like, it ages the face.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, great. That's some great information you're sharing with us, because I think it's very important for us women to pay attention to our bodies, because we are always on the go and we don't pay attention.
Right.
Another thing that you mentioned, which I found very interesting, is when you were mentioning about stress levels and heavy periods. I never associated heavy periods with anxiety, stress, those kind of things, especially for young people. I just was like, oh, well, you just that's just how it is. But they're always in so much pain. Some of them that I knew, and they're older now, but when they were younger, they had these heavy periods.
Yeah. So this is common. So like for girls that have heavy periods, or, with endometriosis, PCOS, girls that get cysts and fibroids, things like that. So this has a very similar underlying hormonal picture. And so basically what's going on in those types of cases is that estrogen levels are too high relative to progesterone being too low. So estrogen sometimes kind of gets demonized. Estrogen in and of itself isn't bad, but hormones are supposed to balance each other, right? They have a sweet spot. Estrogen and progesterone, they're supposed to balance each other, right? Balance and counterbalance. But what tends to happen is estrogen gets too high, progesterone gets too low. They're no longer balancing each other. And what does estrogen do when it's unchecked? It drives growth, right? Now, at the right level, that's good. Growth, repair, beautiful skin, hair, growing a baby, right? But when estrogen is unchecked, it can drive the growth of things we don't want, like fibroids, cysts, too much endometrial tissue where we don't want it, right? So that is high levels of estrogen and not enough progesterone to balance her out. And so that's what's going on in all of those cases. And remember what I said is that estrogen does okay with stress, but progesterone does not. So in these fast-paced modern lifestyles that we're living, where we don't have enough of a break to kind of wind down, right, and support our progesterone, we're very stressed. Progesterone levels start going down, estrogen levels start going up, and then you see women with painful periods or endometriosis or cysts, all of those type of things.
Wow. So all these surgeries doctors want to do because, they say you got endometriosis and cysts, really all that can be prevented by tuning into your hormones.
Yeah. So much of that could be prevented. Now, I'm not saying there's never a place for things like that. And sometimes it gets to the point where that's just the best option. However, my work is all about prevention, right? And so I'm looking at underlying root causes. And, if you lived your way into this, you can live your way out of it. There are natural dietary, lifestyle, supplementary things we can do to bring these back into balance. And so I would say start off by getting your hormones tested, right? That's something that I do because you want to know where your levels are at and are they balanced with each other. And if they're not, then we know and we can fix them naturally. So it doesn't get to a point where you have to go and get, a hysterectomy or get something literally cut out of your body.
Mm-hmm. So I know you work with women who are entering menopause, but let me ask you this. One thing I've noticed lately is that little girls, are starting to reach that puberty stage at a very, very young age.
Yeah.
So what advice could you give parents who have these children who are entering in at an enormously young age, especially? And there's some scientists research done saying that girls specifically are entering very, very young. What kind of advice or what would you say to a parent who is scared because their daughter's entering at age 6 and 7?
Yeah. Well, yes, that is definitely a big concern. First of all, I would say that I personally think that this is happening in large part due to all the pollution and chemicals and hormone disrupting chemicals that we are exposed to on a daily basis, right? Like pesticides and plastics and heavy metals. These things all contain endocrine disrupting chemicals. When we say endocrine, we just mean hormone, but most of these chemicals, what they do is they mimic estrogen. They don't mimic progesterone, they mimic estrogen. So this often makes the situation of estrogen dominance worse, right? Because you got these chemicals that are acting like hormones in the body. And this happens to men and women. So like if you see men, men that get man boobs, men that start getting a figure that looks more traditionally like a woman, that could be because he has too much plastic or too many of these endocrine disrupting chemicals in his body that are acting like estrogen. So the body starts to shift accordingly. So a big part of this, if we're talking on the prevention side, is focusing on what we can control in our homes, in our personal environment. How can we kind of detox, right? How can we bring down levels of plastic? How can we opt for chemical-free products in the homes? People always hate hearing this, but one of the worst things for your hormones is perfumes or anything scented. So if it's not scented with completely natural essential oils, it's synthetic. And if it's synthetic, it probably contains phthalates. Phthalates are extremely toxic to the hormones. So buying organic when possible, using fragrance-free products, chemical-free products, reducing plastic use, especially for food storage. These are all things we can start doing to kind of bring down that burden. But then the other thing I would say, whether you have a daughter that starts menstruating early or not, following the cycle syncing, right? So teaching her and getting to learn about the phases of her cycle and how she can have activity and nutrition that supports each of the phase are going to help her have easier periods and be more balanced.
Oh my God, I love that. And to be very transparent with you, the reason why I asked that question is because I got a 6-year-old granddaughter and a pimple showed up here one day, and then a couple of days later, maybe about 4 or 5 days later, another pimple showed up here, and I'm like,
you're too young for that.
You're too young for that. But then I went back and I remember a friend of the family, her daughter's a teenager now. So think about her daughter being a teenager, probably about 16, 17 now. But her daughter, and this was the first time I heard about early cycles. she was 6 years old
Wow.
when she
That is
started getting
early.
breast. And my granddaughter is 2. And I'm like, what is going on? And
Mhm.
now that you mentioned about the plastic,
Mhm.
I literally watched a documentary the other day and they talked about all the plastic that is in our food.
Yeah, and people think they don't see it, so it's not there. Like they put
Yes.
something in plastic and they're like, "Well, I don't see any pieces of plastic in this." We're talking about microplastic. You
Yes,
can't
that's
see it
what
with
they
your
were
eye. It's
saying.
teeny, teeny, tiny. And they said that it's not even a question of how much plastic if we have plastic inside our bodies, it's how much, because we all have these tiny microplastic particles inside our bodies. All of
Mm-hmm.
us. Mhm.
Yeah. So I keep looking at her and I keep saying, "You're 5."
Yeah.
She's mad at me. She doesn't understand yet,
Mhm.
but it's just I'm not even the parent. I'm the grandparent, and
Mhm.
I'm noticing the. I'm like,
Yeah.
you. How old are you again? And I'm like, oh
Yeah.
my god, this is
Yeah.
really true. Like
Yeah, like
little
6 going on
girls are
16.
starting so early.
It's scary. It's
It
scary.
is very scary.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, but I
Yeah.
think it's just really a wake-up call for us as a society. Like, we can't expect to live in such a toxically polluted society with, big companies and big pharma just telling us, "Oh, you're fine, just buy the products, don't worry about it, don't think for yourself." Clearly, I mean, look at what's happening to our youth and our children.
Mm-hmm. Yep. If you just look at that, I mean,
Mhm.
it's just so different. The
Right.
kids are bigger. Not
Right,
even. I'm not even talking
think
fat
about
bigger.
when we were young, when we were in elementary school, how many children were overweight versus kids now.
Right. Mm-hmm. And it's almost like it's normal to see your child overweight, but God forbid, let them become adults and be overweight. Well,
Mhm.
we've already conditioned them to
Yeah,
be okay with being overweight as a
yeah,
kid.
yeah,
So, now they're going to have these mental breakdowns because
right,
they weren't taught as a young person
right.
how to make sure that you're bringing in the right things. You have blessed us today. You have literally blessed us with this information. And I would love for you to give any last words that you would like to share and make sure you tell us that people can go to take this test.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So if you are suffering with hormone issues, or you're just suspecting that maybe you are, or maybe you're going through the more typical like menopausal, like hot flashes or night sweats or brain fog or things like that, definitely come and take my hormone quiz. That will give you a really good indication of, what hormone is your problem. And when we know, we can do something about it. Like I said, I also do hormone testing. So that is a really, really valuable tool. I offer that all on my website. So my website is balancedhormonesvip.com. So I'll provide the links and everything so you can find it. So if you are worried about that, another big one is if you're having trouble losing weight and you're basically exhausted, like I was saying, that picture of you're kind of trying everything, you're tired, you're frustrated, and nothing's working, I have solutions for you. So definitely come and check out my resources. I have the free resource for the cycle syncing. So if you wanted those 4 phases on how to align your nutrition and your fitness with your period, with each phase, I have that as well. So
And
yeah,
they can get
I'm
that
all
on
about
your website.
education. What's that?
And they can get that on your website too.
Yeah, they can get, so the
Okay.
hormone quiz and those resources are free. So come and
Okay.
get them, because I am all about education. Knowledge is power, right?
Yes, yes. And I'll
Yeah.
drop the website so that you can go visit on her station. But let's hypothetically say, I want to find you on Instagram or Facebook. How do I
Oh yeah,
find you?
yeah. I'm on the socials as well. So I'm just Abby Vallejo on Miss Abby Vallejo on Instagram, and on Facebook under my name as well.
All right. So I hope this has been valuable. I want to thank you so much for giving us such great information, sharing your knowledge, your wisdom with us
Oh, it's
today.
been my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Yes. And I want to thank everyone for tuning in. Make sure you share, follow, like, and make a comment if you want to know more. Abby will come on here and answer any questions that you have. And if
Be happy to.
she doesn't see it, I'll make sure to let her know there's something there for you to answer. But thank you for joining us. We'll be back next week on Wave of Change podcast. Talk to you later. Bye.
You can take a seat now. now. Stories that make you say wow. Lessons learned and dreams we sow. Inspiration like the